Welcome to episode 106 of the Let's Talk Thyroid podcast. I'm your host, Annabelle Bateman, and before we get into talking about gallbladder health with my beautiful guest, today I want to give you a bit of a personal family update before we get into the show. Because, there's always stuff that's going on in people's lives, right? And mine included. But I want to give you a bit of background. So about 30 years ago, my husband started a electronics business out of the avocado packing shed of his parents' farm up on the Sunshine Coast. And over the last 30 years, it's grown into a massive enterprise employing 120 staff. About 17 years ago, he took on a business partner who is incredible. They've worked amazingly as a team together to build this really what is one of our state's top, if not the top, high-tech electronic manufacturing and design businesses. And they're incredible. They win awards. They're amazing. Well, we got a phone call that no one really wants to get at 2:30 on the morning saying there was a fire in the factory, and which is really their manufacturing and main office building. The call had come through to his business partner. So we went up there. There's fire trucks everywhere. It was covered in fire trucks, in, obviously emergency services personnel, ambulance. Not that anyone was injured. I think they're just that standard police, Energex, the whole thing. But the long and the short of it is there's been a massive fire that's gone through the factory. There's going to be a massive, it's just massive. Basically, it's destroyed. It's going to take a bit of time, obviously, to sort of answer questions and work out what's going on. There's lots and lots of good things that have come out of it. So it's not, anyway, it's a mess, but there are good things that have come out of it, and we have great faith that God will bring us through it, that He will bring beauty out of ashes and restore what was lost. We do have that faith, as does Lee's business partner. So, if you are a prayer, we would really appreciate your prayers. We would definitely appreciate your prayers. So I just want to thank you for being part of my community, and as things come up, I suppose, even, in a thyroid health space, that's what we're here to listen to. Obviously that's a stress, and even though it's not my business and I don't work in the business, obviously, it is our business. That is our big thing, our lives together. So that will impact on my thyroid. I will be careful about managing those stress levels to impact on my thyroid health, but you might hear bits and pieces of story over time. So I thought I might just give you a bit of a snapshot as to what has happened in the last couple of days. It's going to be unfolding. I'm not going to give you an update every week. I'm sure that would be boring. But it's more that, it's happened. You're part of my world. I wanted you to know. There's nothing anyone can do. They're amazing team of business partners and staff, and they've got great professional support around them. They're engineers, so engineers in their best are good at problem solving and fixing things. So they are incredible at doing all of that, but it's going to be a long, hard road for them. And I guess then for those of us that are supporting them. So yeah, if you would pray for us, we would really appreciate that. Right. So now I have actually just this morning interviewed my guest, Olivia Haas, today about gallbladder health. Now, you'll hear a bit about my gallbladder story in this interview. I had my gallbladder removed 17 years ago when Ben, who's now 17, was 6 weeks old. So it's a topic that I've actually wanted to cover on the podcast for quite some time. I came across Olivia, who is known online as the gallbladder nutritionist. I really liked her holistic approach to gallbladder health. She actually is an integrative nutritionist. You'll tell from this, she really has a passion to educate people and help people both with gallbladders and without gallbladders, and support their liver health as well. She has struggled with gallbladder disease personally, and she's found that integrative approach through nutrition and lifestyle. So you can see nutrition and lifestyle come out very much in this conversation, as you'd be familiar on this podcast more broadly. She's now a board certified nutritionist. She helps people specifically in the field of gallbladder health to save their gallbladder or to restore their health after gallbladder removal. So whether you have a gallbladder or not, then this podcast will be of interest to you, because we do cover questions that relate to both people with gallbladder, with a gallbladder and without, and of course the connection in with thyroid health. So enjoy this podcast. Okay. Well, welcome Olivia Haas to the Let's Talk Thyroid podcast. We've been wanting to have this chat all about gallbladder health for a little while, and so obviously now is the perfect time to be having it. I love sometimes how time just works that way. So we've kind of been in communication for a little while about this, and so it's a conversation I've been wanting to have for a long time that we haven't actually had it all on the show. So I'm really thrilled that you're here and you're going to help us all about gallbladder health. So thank you very much for joining us today.
Yeah, and thank you for having me and giving me the opportunity to spread more education about gallbladder health. So I'm so appreciative and I'm happy to be here.
All right. So we're going to talk about the gallbladder, which you may or may not think, if you're listening, what has that got to do with thyroid health? Well, I think you'll discover soon a little bit that it's more connected than you think it might be connected. It's certainly more connected than I realized it was connected when I had mine out 17 years ago. But we'll come back to that. I'm just wondering, just to completely go back to basics, can you just explain what the gallbladder is and does?
Yeah. So the gallbladder, I always say, is like this small but mighty organ and sometimes extremely painful organ that is almost, it sits like kind of right below your liver. So it's in the upper right abdomen. And really it, main function is to store and concentrate bile. And so bile is like the soapy like substance created by the liver, and it's stored and concentrated in the gallbladder. And specifically, bile, the main function of it is to help with the digestion of fats. So when we eat a fatty meal or a large meal, there's a hormone that signals your gallbladder to, hey, help us out here, help us to digest down these fats. It releases the bile and it starts the process of fat digestion. So that's the main role, and like high level. But what we do know is the gallbladder really plays a role with bile metabolism, and bile serves so many different functions outside of just fat digestion. It's really important for detoxification. It's important for helping to protect our microbiome, help us have healthy bowel movements. So the gallbladder, as often deemed as an unimportant organ, we're learning more and more that it really plays an important role with your digestion and your metabolism.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't know that. Not fully, and our body is so complicated, isn't it?
Mhm.
And I love that we're just, like you said, still discovering more and more. It's like, I think recently, I mean, I don't know what recently is, but everyone's thought that the appendix is a useless, piece of the body that you can just chop out. And I think there's been research showing that no, it actually does. I don't know what it does, but that it does actually have a function. So there's nothing's there by accident.
Right. So it's always like the organ was in your body for a reason, right? And your body can function without a gallbladder, just like your body can function without an appendix. We just support the body different without the gallbladder. And we just want to make sure people are educated properly on what to do. And we can talk about some of that, some tips for some of the individuals without a gallbladder too.
Yeah. Yeah. So what can go wrong with the gallbladder? Like that's its sort of high level and its purpose. I mean, what typically can go wrong with it, and how would you know if something was going wrong?
Yeah, so typically what can happen, so I'll talk about the most common forms of gallbladder disease. So that would be gallstones. Gallstones, specifically cholesterol gallstones, they account for more than, I think, like close to 90% of gallstones. Gallstones are extremely common today, and they often are a result of some controllable and uncontrollable factors. And what I mean by that is uncontrollable are things like, genetics. Females are higher risk. Females that are in their like fertile years, menopause, perimenopause, they have a higher risk. Even age is a factor. And then you have, your controllable factors that are often due to diet and lifestyle causes. But specifically, cholesterol gallstones, they occur from inflammation in the body, from cholesterol supersaturation. So this poor cholesterol metabolism that occurs in your liver. And it can cause the cholesterol to be extra supersaturated. And when it sits in the gallbladder, often due to like poor gallbladder motility, on top of that, it will form the bile becomes very thick. And when it's not moving nice and well throughout the gallbladder or out of the gallbladder, it will eventually form sludge and then into stones at some point. So that's the most common form of gallbladder disease. The second one that's becoming very common is called biliary dyskinesia. Biliary dyskinesia is a functional disorder of the gallbladder. It's basically when the motility is impaired or it's poor functioning. So it's not contracting well. That is often biliary dyskinesia, which is the diagnosis I had, is very common with individuals with Hashimoto's and hypothyroidism. Because what we've learned is there's a huge connection of your hormones to your gallbladder function, specifically your thyroid. And so your thyroid, and we'll dig into it a little bit further, but it does play a big role in controlling the contraction of the gallbladder. So biliary dyskinesia is the second big diagnosis. I would say gallbladder sludge, and then you have gallbladder polyps. Those are the most common ones. And often when individuals have symptoms of poor gallbladder dysfunction, I would say the number one symptom that occurs is they start to notice intolerance to fats, even healthy fats. They'll start to notice they might get some digestive issues like bloating, cramping following fatty meals, gas, maybe chronic diarrhea, like the sense of urgency, or we call bile dumping, constipation, sometimes heartburn. And then with stool, it could be loose, but it could be like sticky, very stinky, light colored stool. And then we have non-digestive issues with females that they might start to experience like dry skin, brittle hair, maybe some vitamin deficiencies like vitamin D, because of that gallbladder playing a role with your digestion of fats. So those are like the typical symptoms that occur. And the tricky part is like a lot of gallbladder dysfunction, GI symptoms can overlap with other conditions. So it's really important that,
hypothyroid, like
yeah,
the hair,
hypothyroidism and
all of that. Yeah,
IBS,
yeah,
and
yeah. Oh,
SIBO are
yeah, of
very
course.
common ones,
Yes.
that they overlap that you kind of want to rule out. Um, and so it can be kind of misdiagnosed for years until the individual is like ends up in the ER with what we call like a gallbladder attack. And the gallbladder attack is, that's 100% the gallbladder. And gallbladder attacks, they aren't fun. They're extremely painful. A
That's what
lot
I
of
had.
clients,
Yeah.
yeah, you could speak to
Mm.
it. A lot of clients say that it's worse than labor, but it basically occurs when the gallbladder function could be poor, a stone gets stuck, there's bile ducts are blocked, there's inflammation or infection in the gallbladder. And gallbladder attack symptoms typically it kind of varies on the individual, but sometimes it's vomiting, diarrhea, maybe heartburn, and then they get this intense upper right quadrant pain. And the upper right quadrant pain can sometimes sit in the middle sternum. For some people, it feels like a heart attack, and it can kind of wrap around the back into your upper right back, into your upper right shoulder. And the pain can last anywhere from 30 minutes all the way up to several hours. So I typically always recommend for individuals that are having a gallbladder attack. One, if it's your first one, most likely you're going to go to urgent care because you're not going to know what's going on with your body. And then two, if the attack is lingering for longer than normal, or if you're getting other signs like jaundice, vomiting with water, fever, these are signs that you should go to urgent care right away. So the gallbladder attacks are not fun, and those typically do occur when someone's pushed it with a super fatty meal. Like, let's say, I'd say most people will say it's after eating, French fries, a cheeseburger, nachos, maybe even sometimes individuals are sensitive to sugar. So like a really sugary meal, a really heavy meal can do it too, and they typically occur in the evening. And it's usually due to most of us eating larger meals in the evening, stress eating in the evening, or just a combination of things throughout the day. Yeah, they definitely are not fun. I've had my fair share of attacks. Did you ever experience attacks as well?
Well, I really just had one big attack that then
Yeah.
led to getting my gallbladder removed. That's so I don't know. And for me, so my story was so this all happened when my middle child, who's just turned 17, was 6 weeks old. So
Oh,
I'd
wow.
had, so he was my second cesarean section. I had a almost 3-year-old and a 2-year-old. My mum was still staying after, she had come to visit to stay and be here while help out while baby was little. So she was
Yeah.
still staying, and I think I might have picked up my thought process was like I thought I had the pain almost exactly as you described, that pain. I can't quite remember where it was now, but it was probably where you described, and I was thinking, I think I'd picked up my, toddler, and I thought maybe I've ripped some internal stitches. That's what I thought. I've got this new baby, I've had a cesarean, I'm doing pretty well. Like 6 weeks later, you kind of almost getting back to being able to lift a couple of things like a kid, and
Yeah.
I thought I'd torn something. It didn't feel like that, but I didn't know what else it could have been. And that was the first sign for me that anything was wrong. But I look back and I was very sick with that pregnancy. Like that was of my 3 babies, I was the sickest, but I was craving fatty food. And, like it was the only time I would have eaten KFC, which is, I don't know if you have that in America, it was like deep fried chicken,
Mhm.
like, and I would
Yeah.
never eat that now. I hadn't cleaned up I certainly wasn't eating the way I eat now for my thyroid
Mhm.
health. Like I knew I've had Hashimoto's for pretty much forever. So I knew about that, but I wasn't on this kind of managing diet and lifestyle perspective either. So I don't know what I'd eaten that night, but we ended up in the emergency in the middle of the night with the baby in the cradle, and I was breastfeeding him.
Oh,
It was a disaster. And the first hospital just gave me some antispasmodics, said go home, you'll be fine, you know. And then the next day it all came back again, and then I was different hospital who actually did a scan, like an ultrasound. They could see a gallstone stuck in my bile duct.
okay. Yeah.
And I was told at the time, I mean, so this was 17 years ago, so things might have changed. That's a fair while
Yeah.
ago in terms of medical development. And then even what I know about health, is very different to what I knew then too. But I was pretty much, told, well, we've just got to take it out. I mean, I was in excruciating pain, so it was
Yeah.
worse. I mean, I guess I've had had cesareans, haven't gone the full birthing process, but the first one was an emergency Caesar, so I feel like I got the worst of the worst, and it was really painful,
Mhm.
and yeah, it was just weird. But yeah, I'd been really looking back, been really sick during that pregnancy in a way that I wasn't with the other two. So I do think that there probably were signs that I just wasn't clued into. Um,
Yeah.
and that's what I was going to say. But I was told that how everything stretches when you're pregnant and then starts to shrink again after. Apparently, it's quite common um, in that postpartum period for exactly what happened to me to happen, because your bile ducts stretch like everything else does, and then they shrink. And so if you've got a gallstone there, and it can get stuck because yeah. So I thought that was interesting. So yeah, it was pretty. So it was then just obviously taken out in that emergency situation. And I've never had a gallbladder attack since, don't have a gallbladder, but
Yeah.
certainly lots of ongoing issues, which we can cover down the track too. But yeah, so that a lot of what you just said fits with my story.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, the gallbladder attacks, they will stop you in your track. And I think most people remove their gallbladder for the reason of the attacks, right? And that's what surgery is there for if individuals, are in an emergency situation like you, or um, they just can't handle the attacks. Eh, they're not easy. And I would say managing the gallbladder with gallstones or any gallbladder disease is very hard. It's extremely hard. It requires a lot of change, a lot of dedication and commitment when individuals go on this journey to try to save their gallbladder. I always tell people you have options with gallbladder disease, and you should know your options. Is that one, you can take more of like an integrative approach if you are a candidate for it, where you can work to save your gallbladder. Not everybody is. Some people, they need their gallbladder removed, right? And then two, your option B is to do surgery. So you always know you have the option there. And then obviously there's emergency situations where you do need to get the gallbladder moved, and that's okay. We just support the body the right way and support the body properly without the gallbladder, and you're fine. Um, so yeah, I've had my fair share of ER visits as well.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's where most people learn. They're like, I never knew what the gallbladder was. And I'm the same way. I wasn't in my education at this point. And with the first time, like when I went in, I didn't know what the gallbladder was. Most people don't. So they're
Yeah.
kind of in shock. And it's just, that's why I say it's a small, mighty organ, because it is so painful when it wants to be.
All right. Well, Olivia, I'm just wondering if we can talk now a bit more. I mean, you mentioned before the thyroid gallbladder connection, but maybe we could go into that in a little bit more detail for the audience to really understand that a bit better, and then we'll come into some of those. But what can we actually do for our gallbladder health? Is that okay?
Yes, definitely. Yeah. So one huge miss that I think just with gallbladder disease in general, especially for females, is not talking about the hormone connection. Um, Thyroid is one big hormone that plays so many different roles with the gallbladder, and there's actually a bi-directional relationship between the gallbladder and thyroid. So I'll talk about both. So it is important, and this is something I always do with all my clients, is I do make sure we do a full workup on the thyroid. We always make sure that we're supporting it when we're doing a gallbladder management protocol, or even after gallbladder surgery if someone has a known thyroid issue. So I'll talk about the main points, and then how the gallbladder function can also affect the thyroid. So the biggest connection is between the lack of T4, is seen with hypothyroidism, can really increase the risk of gallbladder issues through kind of four main ways. One that we talked about, that poor cholesterol metabolism, so decreased liver cholesterol metabolism. So that lack of T4 can lead to this decreased liver cholesterol metabolism, and this can alter the composition of bile. And as what we talked about earlier, bile is produced by the liver. It's stored and concentrated in the gallbladder. So at the top layer, this bile becomes very saturated and it becomes thick. This again increases the risk of cholesterol gallstones. Another issue that can occur is that decreased bile flow and the impaired digestion from poor thyroid function, the increased risk of constipation. So constipation can lead to further risk of gallbladder or gallstones specifically. So there's that connection. And then we also look at the gallbladder motility. So the thyroid function has been linked to gallbladder motility. So as I mentioned, individuals with biliary dyskinesia, it's very common. They have a history of maybe a diagnosis of Hashimoto's or hypothyroidism, or maybe not yet. There's also poor sphincter of Oddi function. So that lack of T4 can affect the sphincter of Oddi. So your sphincter of Oddi is kind of a muscular valve that helps control the flow of bile into your small intestine. And sphincter of Oddi issues can present very similar to gallbladder symptoms. And they, again, prevent that normal bile flow. So when we look at like trying to work to save the gallbladder, a large focus is really on optimizing the bile production and the bile flow. The more that you improve that bile quality in the liver, you make sure the bile moves nice and well throughout the gallbladder, less likely that it sits saturated in the gallbladder. There's less risk of the gallstones forming, the sludge forming. Individuals with biliary dyskinesia are higher risk of developing gallstones and sludge because their gallbladder is not contracting well. So in the case of biliary dyskinesia individuals, we really want to do things to get that gallbladder contracting and making sure it's moving well. One of the things that we focus on is your thyroid. And then in turn, if your gallbladder is not functioning well and we have this impaired bile flow, it can also affect your thyroid. So one is through poor fat digestion absorption due to poor gallbladder function or maybe not having a gallbladder. So not absorbing like our fat soluble vitamins well, vitamin A, D, E, and K. And these vitamin deficiencies, fatty acid deficiencies, can really impact your hormone health, thyroid function, and that conversion of T4 to T3. Poor detoxification. So what we've learned through cholecystectomy or gallbladder removal is gallbladder plays a role with bile metabolism. And one of those is bile serves a purpose of detoxification in the body. So with gallbladder issues, toxins can build up in the body because your liver and gallbladder play this role in digestion and removal of the waste. So those increased toxins, because of it not getting pulled out from the body, maybe due to impaired bile flow, can really disrupt thyroid health, and may be a cause of a lot of cases for individuals with Hashimoto's. Poor gut health, again, from that impaired bile flow, either due to the gallbladder not contracting well or impaired bile flow without a gallbladder, can lead to bacteria imbalances, specifically in the small intestine. So it's very common individuals with gallbladder issues or history of having their gallbladder moved have SIBO, so small intestinal bacteria overgrowth. And anything, as we know, in the gut can play a big role with that thyroid conversion, right? So we want to make sure we optimize our gut health with gallbladder issues. And then obviously our gut is really essential for absorption of minerals needed for thyroid health. So your iodine, selenium, zinc, iron, we need all of those to help convert the T4 to T3. So these are different connection points of just some high level ones of how your gallbladder and your thyroid are really connected. And so it's really important with individuals that do have a gallbladder diagnosis that we do look at the thyroid health, but also be aware for individuals who have removed their gallbladder, do they have a history of a thyroid issue? And how can we support both?
Yeah. That makes sense, because you think from a hypothyroid perspective, if you don't have enough thyroid hormone, then how is the gallbladder going to be able to contract and keep that bile flowing? And, so even just on that single pathway, and I know there's more connected pieces to that, but it makes sense. If you don't, every cell of your body needs thyroid hormone to function properly. So if it doesn't have that, then how is it going to do its job properly? Yeah. So just even on that super high level, it makes sense when you understand about those different connections. So what about, do you know if there's gallbladder issues that typically happen with overactive thyroid, hyper or Graves, or is it much more underactive? Do you know?
Typically underactive, but it can totally happen with hyperthyroidism as well. Clinically speaking, I would say it's mostly with underactive.
Yeah. Okay. So if you're listening and maybe we'll talk to a few different groups of people that are probably listening. So maybe we start with those who still have a gallbladder. So if you are listening and you still have a gallbladder, whether it's healthy or not, well, you could probably go back and listen to some of those beginning bits where Olivia was talking about the signs and symptoms. But what should someone who obviously has a thyroid condition, that's my audience, and still has a gallbladder, what should they be doing to support their gallbladder health? Like what would you recommend to that group of people?
Yeah. Well, the good news is most things you're probably already doing to improve your thyroid health are also going to be great for your gallbladder health, right? Because the at the end of the day, your body's connected, and so we want to look at what can we do to support this organ, and it's not just focusing just on the gallbladder itself. So we want to, when we look at diet, we really want to support your liver and your gallbladder. A lot of people believe gallbladder disease is actually a disease of the liver. So we
Mhm.
really want to do things that support the liver. And the best thing is that anything we do to support the liver will also support your gallbladder. And to simplify, I'm always about simplifying nutrition. A lot of the dietary recommendations for thyroid health will apply for gallbladder health as well. And the foundation is making sure that we're nourishing our bodies well with eating whole foods as much as possible. So when we look at gallbladder problems, the diets that increase risk of gallbladder issues are diets that are high in refined sugars, low quality fats, so a lot of those vegetable oils, a lot of processed fats, trans fats, and diets that are low in fiber have all been linked to gallbladder issues. So when we look at trying to remove out stressors from the body or remove out stressors on the gallbladder near the liver, we want to emphasize eating real foods. I just like to keep it simple, not complicate it, and really try to prioritize these foods over processed foods.
Mhm.
In a gallbladder diet, if you do have gallbladder issues, the biggest foods that are no are usually what I call no-nos, is fried foods, because typically, as you know, those are asking for a gallbladder attack to occur.
Mhm.
Um, as I mentioned, diets that have been linked to gallbladder issues. So we know fiber is a critical piece in a gallbladder diet. So we really want to make sure we maintain adequate fiber in the diet, because this helps to bind to any excess bile, excess cholesterol, excess hormones, remove them out from the body. So it's a critical piece for making sure we improve that bile quality. We
Mhm.
remove out toxins, so less stress on the body as a whole and your liver. And then fiber is also great to boost your gut health, right? So it's also all encompassing, really great to prioritize in the diet. A big piece that is important with thyroid issues is trying to make sure we avoid constipation as much as possible. So we want to make sure we're doing everything to keep our bowels moving. So through diet, through lifestyle support, if that stuff is not helping, then dig a little deeper and look at the cause of your constipation. So a lot of things to support your thyroid, but also looking at what your gut health, the health of your stomach, what we can do to help improve that. There are obviously like what we call key supportive foods for your gallbladder and liver health, and that help promote healthy bile. And those are things like bitter foods. So things like dandelion, radish, radicchio, anything that's bitter to your palate, parsley. Those are things that we want to have fun with in the diet. um,
Mm.
Dandelion, artichoke, beets, turmeric, playing around with different herbs. Herbs can be a great addition to help promote that bioflow, support the bile quality and production and the gallbladder contraction. I always recommend working with a practitioner when it comes to herbs, or a local herbalist to help you. There's tons of great herbs that help support the gallbladder and liver. So, number ones that you probably have heard about are things like dandelion, artichoke, and milk thistle, but there's a ton other ones. And you always want to check on contraindications. So, that's why I recommend that you work with a practitioner there.
Yeah.
Make sure you hydrate, and we hydrate smart, because bile is made up of 90% water. It's also got some minerals in it, phospholipids, cholesterol, to name a few things. So hydration is really important to maintain and improve that bile quality. And adding minerals sometimes to your water can be a great addition. Sometimes doing like lemon with some sea salt, or lemon and some trace minerals in it. But the hydration is really important to help improve the bio quality as well.
Yeah.
So those are some key things that I would recommend for individuals with thyroid issues to help protect their gallbladder health. With your history of gallbladder disease as well, are there any things that you would kind of add to some of those points?
Yeah, that's a good question. Look, I certainly think, like I said before, from when I had my gallbladder issues to now, maybe for different reasons. I mean, I didn't immediately even clean up my diet. I certainly immediately probably reduced. I don't know. I mean, I was much more conscious of not eating the fatty foods and the fried
Mhm.
foods, and immediately afterwards, and probably about maybe about, I don't know, 3 or 4 or 5 years after that, I made a significant change to my diet. That's when I really started changing my
Mhm.
diet for my overall thyroid health. And I would say now, I mean, in that time, like I've worked with, naturopaths, and I've had the same doctor for all of that time. She's a wonderful integrative health doctor, and I'm always taking different things to support my liver, because I mean the way I understand it is, yeah, when you've had, and we'll come to this, when you have your gallbladder removed, well, your liver picks up a lot of the slack, and already your liver is, it's converting your T4 to T3, or a large proportion of that. It's all your detoxification. So I figure my poor little liver is
Mhm.
working overtime,
Yeah.
and so I'm usually on some sort of, I'm often taken, certainly on and off over the years, taken milk thistle. I'm not sure about dandelion, but like definitely there's always some liver support
Mhm.
supplement that I'm taking, recommended by my doctor or the naturopath or both. Um, I, I'm, I mean, I would say 95% of the time I'm only eating healthy fats.
Mhm.
So, I
Yeah.
mean, if I go out, would I have some, French fries, chips, probably, from time to time, but I'm not eating battered, deep fried fish and chips or things like that. And I guess that's the challenge, isn't it? Because when you, like, the whole fried foods is just, they're fried in crap oil. Like that's
Mhm.
your cheap vegetable oils and soy oils, corn, probably, I don't know if you have corn oil
Mhm.
there. I think you do much more corn in the States than we have here generally. So they're the worst of the worst. So you're not only getting all the fat, but you're getting all the bad fat. They're not deep fried in coconut oil or
Mhm.
olive oil, or I mean, you probably wouldn't want that either, but you definitely, so I think for me, I've been conscious of that over time. I suppose I dip in and out of consciousness. I have of times of thinking, oh yeah, that's right, I don't have a gallbladder. Oh, that makes sense why at the end of, yeah, like I probably notice more like things like I may get the occasional bit of heartburn or reflux, and that's usually after a heavier, fattier meal and dessert and a glass of wine. Like it's those
Yeah.
whole package deals, because I don't like eat that every night. But if you are at an event or you've got people over and you're having a special occasion, you tend to have the richer food and dessert and the wine. And so it's those times I'm like, oh yeah, okay, all right, now I've tipped over the edge a bit.
Yeah, definitely. And you brought up a good point that something that is important for people to know is the type of fats you eat make a big difference for gallbladder issues too. So long term, the standard recommendation is to follow a low fat diet with gallbladder issues. And yes, a low fat diet can be helpful, especially if you are dealing with chronic attacks and pain, or if you just had an attack. But long term, if we're working to save our gallbladder, we really shouldn't be on a low fat diet, because there has been some research that shows that that can lead to further of that
Hmm.
poor bile quality, but also the type of fats that you eat. So as you mentioned, a lot of these vegetable oils, and we can go on a whole topic about that, but the vegetable oils can also impair your bile quality. It can lead to inflammation in the body, really tough on your liver when we eat too much of these in the diet. And those types of fats are the types of fats that have been linked to gallbladder issues. So when we're working to save our gallbladder, it is important we emphasize healthy fats. We work to do things to support your gallbladder, your liver, and that bile quality. Over time, the more that support you do for these functions in the body, the more individuals are able to enjoy healthy fats without
Hmm.
having digestive symptoms and gallbladder symptoms. Just to show you like how powerful just the type of fats you eat on a gallbladder diet. I had a client that just removed all the vegetable oils, these low quality, was like very strict about it, and all of her gallstones were gone. So
Wow.
just from that switch, and she just emphasizing the fiber in the diet. So, um, you know, it sounds silly to simplify nutrition and just focusing on whole foods and healthy fats, but that's what it is. It's just giving your body the simple tools it needs to do its job and heal. So emphasizing whole foods and healthy fats is just as important in a gallbladder diet.
So, Olivia, what would you say are the healthy fats that people should focus on? Like,
Yeah, so typically in a gallbladder diet, people can handle olive oil, more coconut products, coconut oil, animal fats, fat like some fish. Depending on the individual, if their gallbladder is sensitive, they may be more sensitive to things like ghee, nuts, seeds, avocado, eggs. It just depends on the individual. But
mhm.
if they are sensitive to a lot of these healthy fats, in a lot of cases, like I said, if you do support for your gallbladder, your liver health, and that bile, they can reintroduce some of these healthy fats in. So people can almost be on, enjoy all of these fats with flexibility, and not have problems with their gallbladder. It just depends on the individual.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm just wondering, then is the next group of the people that ones that don't have a gallbladder? With that, we've kind of done that. You've got a gallbladder. I suppose if you maybe there's the interim. It's like, well, maybe we've covered this, but if maybe this is the opportunity. If there's something you think we haven't covered, you've got some gallbladder problems,
Uh-huh.
and you are actively trying to, look after it. Is that what we've just been talking about, or is there something else, that somebody in that category that maybe they've had, some gallbladder attacks but haven't had it removed? What would you
Yeah.
say? Is there anything different to say to that person?
So working with individuals who are trying to work to save their gallbladder, a lot of those
Hmm.
tips apply. So just focusing on
Okay.
the whole foods, um, making sure you prioritize healthy fats, maintain adequate fiber in the diet, avoid constipation, support healthy bile flow, and make sure you hydrate. These are kind of like the key, I call like pillars or foundations of a gallbladder diet.
Hmm.
I dig further into all of this too in my Gallbladder Saver Society membership if anyone needs further help.
Hmm.
We go over how to establish a sustainable gallbladder diet, work on getting some of those more fats in the diet, and as well as like kind of addressing the cause of gallbladder disease so you can work to save your gallbladder. Um,
Yeah.
Typically, so there's a case too of individuals who have removed their gallbladder, right? And should they do in this
Yeah.
case? And um, a lot of times, individuals even without the gallbladder, it doesn't change that much. A lot of the
Hmm.
stuff that you do before gallbladder surgery is kind of the same, even post-op.
Hmm.
Um, the difference is I think post-op individuals can play a little bit more with their diet and push it a little bit more without having gallbladder attacks, but not saying they're not going to deal with GI issues. As you mentioned, like when you overdo it with the diet, you do have issues with GI symptoms.
Hmm.
That can be very typical for individuals after gallbladder surgery, is having those sensitivities. But, with, as we talked about, if you're an individual that has had your gallbladder moved, you can still function without a gallbladder. We just make sure that we do long-term digestion support to help. So what we've learned through cholecystectomy is that, or gallbladder surgery, is that gallbladder plays this very vital role with bile. And so what we want to do post-op is support this bile and really support your liver, is really key. So doing a lot of long-term liver support. And at the root of that, again, is your diet and your lifestyle choices. That is the foundation that's going to support your liver health, right? So making sure, again, you focus on eating a whole foods diet, removing out stressors as much as possible through the diet, removing out or avoiding things like the refined sugars, refined flours, and the low quality vegetable oils as much as possible. Obviously, we can't avoid those altogether. And I'm all about balance, just as you are. So we may enjoy some of those things from time to time, but we want to do some liver support there. And again, fiber is really key after gallbladder surgery, for
Hmm.
many reasons. Again, to make sure that the bile, is bile quality staying, it's remaining in a good quality, right?
Yeah.
And we're moving out toxins from the body. We're supporting our gut. A large part of digestive symptoms after gallbladder surgery are often tied to that change of bile, but also your change in your microbiome and your gut health. So fiber is a key to help boost your good
Mm.
gut flora. Um,
Yeah.
Avoiding constipation again, even post-op. Still doing a lot of liver supportive foods, bitters, the herbs, dandelion, artichokes, beets, turmeric, ginger. That all stays the same. Hydrate. Make sure we do that. One thing that can occur for individuals without a gallbladder is that change in the concentration of bile, or some individuals struggle with too much bile getting dumped at once. So for individuals without a gallbladder, if they're on the spectrum of where they're dealing with the loss of concentrated bile, so they probably will deal with more sticky stool or constipation, we may use some functional supplements to help in this case. So depending on the individual, the standard supplements that you may hear on the market are things like ox bile or TUDCA.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, for individuals with thyroid issues, it is important that you monitor your symptoms if you are taking these products, or work with a practitioner to help you. But those supplements, ox bile or TUDCA, are often used after gallbladder surgery to help support that bile, the loss of the concentrated bile, specifically for individuals who are struggling with more of the fat malabsorption, constipation issues, sticky stool. Other things, artichoke is an excellent herb that can help support the bile, but also help support your liver. So it's kind of getting a twofold there. Can also help with estrogen dominance. So I like to use artichoke a lot. And then phosphatidylcholine as well helps to support your fat digestion without a gallbladder. So those are some functional supplements that we may use in the case of someone without a gallbladder, is around mealtime, just helping them to optimize the digestion of fats, because that's what can typically occur without the gallbladder is the change in fat digestion, the change in the digestion of fat soluble vitamins. And so those are things that you want to monitor.
Yeah.
There is cases where individuals without the gallbladder struggle with too much bile getting dumped at once. And this can be quite irritating to the intestines. And this is like the number one post-op symptom that I deal with clients with. So it can be called bile dumping, bile acid diarrhea, or bile acid malabsorption, where there's just basically too much bile getting released at once from the liver, creating a laxative effect. So in this case, individuals wouldn't necessarily want to do things to stimulate more bile or using bile salts. Those can be quite irritating when they're struggling with a lot of dumping. But focusing on the foundations first, with making sure we have a good diet in place, we're getting enough fiber in there, we're watching our type of fats that we're eating, and being mindful too about stress, because typically the stress can be a big component of bile dumping after gallbladder removal. So I know you've had your gallbladder removed, correct?
Yeah.
So is there anything that like you've learned from your journey of not having your gallbladder that you felt was really helpful or that helped you?
I think just really the biggest thing that I've learned is just that for me is that then my liver really needs, it's what we were just talking, what you were just talking about. My liver just really needs the extra support. And I think over time, I mean, it's been 17 years, so that's a long time my body has adapted to not having a gallbladder. And it, probably if you had have asked me 16 years ago, obviously the answers probably would have been different, because it is a long time ago, and I wasn't managing my health in the same way. So, but now I think I know, for me, when I get stressed, or if my body is um, detoxing a lot, like for example, I was taking some supplements, maybe it was last year, that was really encouraging a whole lot of detoxification, which in theory is good, but my liver couldn't quite cope with it. And so that then meant that it pushed me into hypothyroidism again. Sort of blew my thyroid out, because it was like, oh, hold on, now my liver's got all this kind of toxic burden to get rid of.
Mhm.
And it could only cope with so much. And so then the whole body goes, well, we're just going to slow everything down again. Then we're going to just give it all, slow it down. And so that certainly happened for me on and off over the years. It's sort of, and so I think that's just that the liver just has that extra load to carry. And so for me, it doesn't take a lot to tip my liver over the edge of being able to cope. And so for me, that's being aware of, like if I'm going to be doing anything that's deliberately kind of detoxing, do it very, very slowly, really support the liver. Like I've, in the last probably 6 months or so, been deliberate about, like you were saying before, with the hydration and taking extra electrolytes, like electrolytes in my water to, for that extra absorption of the water, staying hydrated.
Mhm.
I've got like ox bile sort of in my box of supplements. I don't take it all the time, but probably, you know, more recently, if I know I've had a pretty heavy meal, I will take one, with
Mhm.
that, but that's probably every, I don't know, once a month maybe, like it's not that often, but they're there if I need them.
Mhm.
And but I think it's the biggest thing really is for me, it's understanding that the liver carries the load,
Mhm.
and the liver is so important to your thyroid health. It's so important to detoxification. We were talking in last week's podcast about methylation and the MTHFR gene and that, all that process in the liver. And like I've got that gene and, so I think, okay, well, my methylation pathways aren't that great. So I've just done a lot of liver support, which is also
Mhm.
the diet support and all those things that you've just talked about. I think, if I had have known even that when that first happened, or beforehand, well, who knows? But that's life, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it is what it is. And, I certainly function without a gallbladder, but it's not been without its challenges for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's the one thing with gallbladder surgery is that, it's definitely needed at times, but it only treats one organ and it's not looking at the big picture. And if anyone one thing I would take from this, podcast is if you do struggle with gallbladder issues, you have to ask yourself why, but also what other functions in the body have contributed to this issue.
Hmm.
And,
Yeah.
you know, the number one thing I would always recommend to anyone is stop focusing on just this one organ. Look at your whole body and specifically really support your liver.
Hmm.
And no matter if you keep your gallbladder or if you're post-op, your liver is a beautiful organ and it supports so many different functions in your body. And one of them is really playing a big role with gallbladder issues, but it also, as you know, takes a big stress after gallbladder surgery. So
Yeah.
the more that we can do things to support the liver, the better energy, longevity, longer health that we have.
Yeah.
So it's good. It's I'm really glad that you brought that up too, and found that along your journey.
Yeah. I've got one quick question and then one question that I should have asked at the beginning that I didn't. So the quick question is, when you were talking about the herbs before, like the dandelion, artichoke, you mentioned a couple of other things. Do you mean artichoke, the vegetable that you eat, or is there a separate like herb that is like a medicinal thing that is artichoke? Or are we talking about the vegetable that you'd cook?
Yeah, so it's both actually.
Okay. Right.
Yeah, so
Okay.
it's both. So artichoke's cool because it's got what we call it's got cholagogue and choleretic properties. So in herbal medicine, choleretics, they help support the liver and
Hmm.
cholagogues help support the gallbladder. So that's why
Okay.
I like artichoke because you kind of get a two for one.
Yep.
Um, and so I typically use a lot of artichoke personally on myself.
Hmm. Okay. But yeah, so I wasn't sure if that, because sometimes, yeah, like you say, there is that, like you might get it in a herbal tincture or a, supplement, but
Yeah.
there's also the vegetable. So you're saying it's both. It can be
Uh-huh.
both. Okay.
Both.
All right.
Yep.
That clears that up. My other question was, when we were talking at the beginning about, well, how much if you've got a gallbladder, or like the symptoms, like can you be tested like without being in the emergency room and having a ultrasound and discovering gallstones, like, are there any kind of tests you can have done, or, that sort of,
Yeah.
yeah.
Definitely. Yep. So diagnostic testing is really important. So if you suspect you have gallbladder issues, like you're fitting some of the clinical symptoms, it is important you do testing. I always recommend work with a gastroenterologist if you can, but some primary care can run the testing for you. So the standard protocol is doing an ultrasound first and maybe some blood work. So the ultrasound of your upper right abdomen. So looking at your liver and your gallbladder. Some doctors, like if there's other GI symptoms present, they would do an endoscopy, an MRI or CT scan. So
Mhm.
that's typical for diagnosing gallstones or sludge. If the individual comes in and they present gallbladder symptoms, but their ultrasound is clear for gallstones and sludge, then they may follow up with the HIDA scan. And I'm actually not sure if this is a common test in your country, but in the US, it's the HIDA scan with ejection fraction, and that's typically done to test the function of the gallbladder.
Okay.
So
I don't know.
that
I
will
haven't heard of
diagnose.
it, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist here. Yeah,
Okay,
okay.
okay, yeah. I'm
I
not
don't
too
know.
sure.
Yeah.
Like in the UK, they don't really do HIDA scans that often, or it's tougher to get it done.
Okay.
The HIDA scans will diagnose biliary dyskinesia, so either poor function or what we call hyperkinetic, which is a gallbladder that contracts very fast,
Mhm.
or spasms quite frequently. So those are the standard conventional testing. And then in like functional or integrative medicine, we have our own testing to kind of look at the gallbladder function.
Mhm.
So you can look at typically like a comprehensive stool analysis and look at the fecal fat in the stool. Or sometimes we'll run like an organics acid test as well. And that will also give a good picture of, your liver, some of the nutrients needed, look a little bit high level about your gut and digestion. So those are typical that we'll kind of run. And then the further thing I would say is blood work in functional integrative medicine. We would probably run more extensive testing with the
Mhm.
blood work. So looking at your thyroid function is one, vitamin D levels, sometimes looking at some of your minerals for testing there. Doing in some cases an HTMA is great too, to look at some key nutrients that play a role with your gallbladder health and liver health. So, but typically speaking, it would be an ultrasound and blood work is the standard
Yeah.
form of
Okay.
diagnosing
Yeah.
gallbladder
No, that's
problems.
good. That's helpful. Well, that means if you're listening and you think, oh yeah, maybe some of these symptoms I've got are related to gallbladder, well, you can go to your
Mhm.
doctor and at least start that process, or yeah, because often it is a process, isn't it, of these sort of
Yeah.
things to be determined. So
Yes, and it's
um
always better in your case, you experienced it going to the ER, right? It's better to know if you suspect gallbladder problems is just to have it checked sooner than
yeah.
later before having hopefully an ER visit as your
Yeah,
first
absolutely.
diagnosis.
Look, and yeah, totally. And like I think, look, I think probably for me a lot of it was masked with pregnancy.
Uh-huh. Yep.
That's really what I think was, I was some of that, the nausea, vomiting, like I was always, like
Mhm.
I was, you know, hard to know. Like I just thought, oh, well, I'm having a sick pregnancy, But I do
Yes.
think in hindsight, some of that was probably connected to my gallbladder health during that time. But I,
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah, your gallbladder and
just
your
assumed
liver
that it
get.
was being pregnant, So
Yeah, pregnancy is a huge because of the connection with your hormones, not just your thyroid, but your
mm,
sex hormones, your progesterone and estrogen, really impact your gallbladder function and that the cholesterol saturation during pregnancy and postpartum. So it's very, very common. Females are diagnosed with gallbladder issues during that time and
yeah,
postpartum, like you experienced.
yeah,
So typically people will start to experience symptoms close to that, like almost month 2 all the way up to 4 months.
yeah.
And then
Which was
potentially
so
when
good
they
to know. It
wean.
was pretty standard. It was pretty
Yeah,
normal.
it's not fun. It's like you just gave birth to a baby or you're trying to carry a baby and this is the last thing that you want to stress
Oh my
about.
gosh, it was because you think, and then it was horrible. I just remember being in
Yeah.
hospital too, like you know, pumping breast milk and throwing it away because it had all the anesthetic in it, and like trying to keep the baby. Oh, it was just like, oh my gosh. Yeah.
Yeah.
Newborn, yeah, a 6-week-old baby and then in hospital with surgery was just not a good, it was not a fun time. But we
No.
got through it. We got through it. We got through it. Olivia, I think we've covered a lot of ground. I think you've given some really helpful information. Is there something I haven't asked you that you think that audience needs to know, or a parting kind of word that you'd like to say to anybody that's listening?
Yeah, no, I think we covered most of the high level of some tips for gallbladder issues, also how to support the body without a gallbladder. If you have further questions, I'm mostly on Instagram at gallbladder.nutritionist. You're more than welcome to reach out to me on there. I have loads of resources for individuals who are working to save their gallbladder, or who are struggling with GI issues after gallbladder surgery. But just as kind of to leave you with some top tips for any listeners here to support your gallbladder health, again, as we talked about, keep it simple with nutrition, focus on eating real foods, avoid or limit some of those gallbladder disease promoting foods as much as possible, the processed foods, vegetable oils, refined sugars. Make sure we prioritize enough fiber in the diet, and then support your bile flow through some of the key bitter foods, artichokes, beets, lemon, turmeric, dandelion, and just various herbs. There's so many things that you can add in the diet to help support your gallbladder and liver health, but those are some key points that can be helpful for anyone listening who has their gallbladder or who has had their gallbladder removed.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, well, I think that's really helpful. I think, right, I've never cooked an artichoke. So
Yeah.
there you go. That's my challenge. Is,
Yeah.
after this is go get some artichoke and
Yeah.
work out how to cook it and start incorporating that into my diet. So I think
Mhm.
that I mean, there's lots of different things we could do, but yeah, I'm thinking,
Yeah.
okay, I'm going to learn how to cook artichoke.
Yes.
Um, Olivia, if people wanted to work with you, obviously you're on Instagram. I'll put all the links in the notes below. But if someone wanted to work with you, tell us a bit about who you work with, what you offer, and where should people go to find you outside of it, or is it just Instagram?
Yeah. So my website is simple. It's gallbladderdiet.com. So it's easy to find. Like I said, I'm mostly on Instagram at gallbladder.nutritionist, or on Pinterest at gallbladder.nutritionist. If you are working to save your gallbladder, I have an awesome membership called the Gallbladder Saver Society that includes everything you need to know about establishing a gallbladder diet and how to work on the cause, work to shrink gallstones, reverse sledge, and improve that gallbladder function. If you are struggling with symptoms after gallbladder removal, or you just want to know how to support your body without a gallbladder, I have a self-paced course called the Gallbladder Removal Reset. And then for any individuals who really like more individualized recommendations and support, then that's where I help support them through one-on-one. So I have loads of resources. So I would, as I mentioned, check out probably the best place is through Instagram at gallbladder.nutritionist, or my website, gallbladderdiet.com.
Yep, perfect. Excellent. Well,
Yes.
I will make sure, yeah. So go check those places out. I think what I've found through this podcast and all the beautiful guests like you that I have willing to share knowledge is that we're a broad health community that just loves to educate and help people. And so there's usually a wealth of knowledge, a wealth of information. But we are here as people to help hold your hand as well. And I think that's what you're saying is if you need that bit of extra help, then you're there to help hold their hand to
Mhm.
get that help and to really make sure that you're implementing the things that you need to. So I think
Yeah.
yeah, it's great. So, so yeah, go check out Olivia's things and work with her if you feel like that would be helpful for your health. So thank you so much, Olivia, for all your time, for your generous information. Your kind spirit. I think you'd be a very gentle, lovely person to work with. You've just got
Oh,
that nice
thank you.
kindness, a kind, gentle softness about you. So yeah, thank you for being with us today.
Yes. And thank you again for having me on here and helping me spread some gallbladder education. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. All right, so this is the KISS Thyroid Coaching questions at the end of the segment, just to help reflect back on what you've learned or heard. And as you've just heard, like, I'm thinking, artichokes, all right, I'm going to cook with artichokes now, which that's a really small thing in terms of gallbladder health. But you might want to have a think about, like, so obviously depending on whether you have a gallbladder or don't have a gallbladder, or whether you know you've had some gallbladder challenges and still have your gallbladder, your response to this podcast will be different. But yeah, this is your opportunity just to stop for a minute and think, okay, what do I need to do about this? Do I need to change my diet and lifestyle more broadly, just as an overall support? Do you need to go get your gallbladder checked out and have some of those tests run, or talk to your doctor or integrative health practitioner about that? If you don't have a gallbladder, are you actively helping to support your liver? So what action are you going to take as a result of what you've heard today? Just want you to have a think about that and take that action. See you next time. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Let's Talk Thyroid. If you have enjoyed the content, or perhaps you're thinking, oh, my mum needs to hear this, or my sister, or my bestie, I would love it if you would share this episode with them. That really just helps spread the positive and practical message of Let's Talk Thyroid, and helps that broader thyroid community, our friends and family, to live well with their thyroid health. So you can just, share the episode. If you subscribe on whatever platform you're listening to this podcast, it's free. It's really helpful, because then you'll be notified every time a new podcast comes out, and it just makes it much easier to find. There's usually a little subscribe button, or a bell, or follow often is the terminology. So if you wouldn't mind doing that, that would be helpful. Of course, if you want to leave a review, even better, just a sentence or two about how the podcast has helped you. You can definitely connect with me via letstalkthyroid.com. That's where you'll find access to my book, my coaching, my freebies, and really everything that I offer in terms of thyroid support.